Hi boys, welcome back to the channel YouTube. I'm Navy Dad. This is Rusted Bolts Garage. Today is not about cars. Today is a mystery. Oh! Well, I guess we really do have a mystery, don't we?
Where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now.
Okay, I just had to have a little fun with that. What this is, this is a little crazy, okay? Totally out of my norm. So, long story short, I was adopted at birth. And my mom, before she passed away, she kind of encouraged me to seek out and just see what I found. Well, oh my God, I found a mystery, and it's crazy. So what I did last year at Thanksgiving, I did an 8-part series on my TikTok channel. They do stories and stuff like that out there, so I thought I'd do it. Might be kind of cool. Well, some of my family members, hi fam, how y'all doing? They would like to see it too, but they don't use TikTok. So I decided, well, I'll just pull everything down from TikTok because I accidentally deleted the majority of the original film from my phone. So the quality is not perfect, but you get the point. So I downloaded everything and I put it all together in a single piece here. It is a little long, but there's 8 parts, and I'll have a little interlude in between each part if you want to, come back and see later, or if you don't. But again, this is really for my family and my friends. So if you're looking for car stuff, don't worry. That's the next video. We'll be back to the Chevelle. So without further ado, here we go. Okay. So here we go, part 1 of Who the Hell Am I? Y'all wanted to hear it, so. Okay, so a couple things. I'm shooting this horizontally. I know TikTok likes vertical shit, but editing vertical is a pain in the ass, right? So I'm gonna screw up. So I wanna edit this. Plus that, I'm gonna try and keep these as short as possible. I don't know how many they're gonna be. I'm not going to do the standard TikTok thing where you do a story and you upload something every 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, I don't have time for that. So I'm probably going to upload once a day, usually in the evenings when I have time. So this will be part 1. And we'll follow along if you're interested. If you're not, go away. I'm doing this for me, and I'm doing this for my sons. So just because it's just a bizarre story, and it's a mystery, and it's not quite solved yet. And will it get solved? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. But, all right. And I'm sorry if I look down, I don't look you right in the eyeball. It's because I have notes right here. First, a little bit about me. I was born August 19th, 1960, and I was adopted at birth. My parents couldn't have children on their own. And they went to the state of Washington Adoption Agency and filed paperwork at the end of 1959 to adopt a child. They wanted a boy, of course. And so along August 1960, I came along. Now I actually went home with them on, I think September 13th, 1960, and the adoption was finalized, took a long time back then, in November 1961. Now I always knew I was adopted. In fact, they had I think it was a Curious George book, from what I remember. The book's long gone. They used to read it to my brother and I, because my brother's also adopted. He was born in 1963. So we always knew. They never kept that a secret. And we were never treated by anybody in any part of the family as anything more than their child. And that's just the way it was. They're my parents. And I couldn't ask for a better upbringing. And I couldn't ask for a better upbringing. It was great all the way around. Unfortunately, my parents did get divorced when I was 21, but we never really saw the problems. I mean, we were always a family, and it's a typical story of the 70s and 80s. They were high school sweethearts. They went to college together. They both graduated from Washington State University, got married in their senior year. My dad was in the Air Force for 2 years, came out, was an IBMer. In fact, cool story there. My dad actually worked on one of the very first a computer program for managing inventory at a grocery store. 200 positions of memory. That's 0.25 megabytes. Yeah, and anyways, we won't get into that, but it's pretty cool. So I was born in Seattle, and we lived in Bellevue at the time when I came home with my parents. They were both from Yakima, Washington, and their drive was to get back to Yakima at some point. And I think in '62 we moved back to Yakima. We lived in Yakima until 1970 when my dad got transferred for work to Spokane. And I grew up in Spokane, my teenage years from age 9 to 16, and then I got transferred to Dallas, and that's how we got here. And I miss the skiing, but I don't miss the cold. I mean, Texas very quickly became my home because I was 16, got introduced to Texas girls. So anyway, okay, so I digress with all this. So I never was really curious about the adoption and everything. I really didn't really have a whole lot of questions or anything. I mean, they answered every question that they could, which wasn't much. They didn't have any information on the birth parents. And I always had this weird reoccurring dream that Howard Hughes was actually my biological father. Yeah, don't ask. It started way back when. Anyway, so in I think it was August of 2013. I can't believe it was that long ago. I saw a story on Good Morning America, and where the state of Washington was opening up their adoption records, and in two ways. One, if you were if you were a parent who had put your child up for adoption, you could send a letter in, and you could provide information, not necessarily getting the families together, but you could provide medical information, medical background, history, that kind of stuff. Or they would put information out there, hey, if my adopted child contacts you, we could, get together, and the state would facilitate that. So I kind of hemmed and hawed on that for a while. I'm going to end there. I don't want to make these too long, but yeah. So the next time you're going to find out, you're going to go, what? Yeah. So see you then. Okay, so where were we? Yes, so I hemmed and hawed about sending in a request for my birth certificate. So I sat on it for 2 years until October of 2015. I thought, I'm going to go ahead and just send it in because I was getting older at that point. I've always been very healthy, except for that point of 8 years where I got fat. So I'm probably in better shape right now than I have been since my early 30s. So I've always been healthy. I never get sick kind of thing, except for this head cold that I got in Cancun. But I wanted that really for my sons, because I don't have anything. I don't know if there's cancer that runs in the family, whatever, and that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, let me just go see if it's out there. So you had to actually write a physical letter and send it to the state. And they said it could be anywhere between 6 weeks and 6 months before you get a response. So I sent that, and it was about 6 weeks, and I got a response back. And of course, here is a copy of the original birth certificate and the mother's full name. No information on the father. Internet, of course, being the internet, what do you think I did? Of course, found her in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, it was her obituary that I found, and she died in May of 2015. I was like, oh, well, okay, that's the end. It had some information there on her and her family, brothers and sisters and children and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll go past this, because in looking at when she got married in September of 1961. It's a good chance that their family knows nothing about me, right? So, okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. So I did. And then we were having a conversation at Christmas 2016 with the family, and I thought, who would know better than the sister? And that's where we'll end this one. So we ended the last one with the sister. hold on, let me stop. I am changing the names of everybody involved. But I'm not changing the dates, and I'm not changing the cities. But I'm changing the names, just so you know. To protect the innocent, not so innocent, and, well, just protect everybody, right? So I thought, okay, the sister. If anybody's going to know what happened, it's the sister, right? So very quickly, internet, of course, I found her location information. I even found her phone number and email address, and I thought, I'm not going to call her. I'm not going to do that. So what I did is I set up a Gmail address with just kind of a phony name, Jimmy Doe 99, as a reason for Jimmy I'll get to later. But so I went ahead and I sent her a letter, and I just kind of explained, hey, this is, all I'm not looking for anything except for medical information for my sons and for myself, because I'm getting older, and for my sons. And so I said, I will keep this email address open for 6 months. If I don't hear from you, you will never hear from me again. And that's just the end of it. I sent that on January 10th, and I got a response on January 29th. And it was pretty interesting. I won't read you the whole letter, but she responded to the first sentence. Well, your letter did surprise me, but only because I expected someone to connect with me, particularly after my sister died. I have read thoroughly through the letter. I did send her a copy of the birth certificate as well. I have read through the letter several times, and I wish I could give you more information, but this doesn't correspond with her personal history. I was like, that's kind of weird. But she did say, I will be happy to send you medical information from the family. So we sent each other several emails back and forth. I sent her pictures of my family. I told her my real name, where I lived, and that kind of stuff. And she sent me pictures back of her family. And one thing she did say, she said, well, you certainly have my dad's smile and his eyes. Well, interesting. Then she sent me another email, which was a bombshell. And I had to rethink this all over again. I mean, literally, the information she sent was like, well, who the frickin' hell am I then? So I'm going to end there. Okay, so I hope you all are enjoying this. It's fun for me to put together finally. I mean, it's been actually 14 years in the making, almost 15 years. Wow, that's crazy. So anyway, let's get started with the. There's actually 3 big bombshells in this thing, and well, there's several, but there's 3 big ones, and then so this one is the first. Okay, so first of all, some names. Again, I've changed the names, right? Okay, so bio mom, we'll call her, who passed away. Her name is Carol Jackson. She's from Pendleton, Oregon. The location is accurate. She was the oldest of 3, sister Sarah, who I've been emailing with, and a younger brother named Johnny. Here's something interesting that was in the obituary that comes up later. But Carol was she was a 2-time president of Junior League. I'm sure y'all have heard that. In Riverside, California. She was specifically involved in promoting children of need. Now, this is going to come in later, so you'll see this. Okay, so a couple more emails with Sarah, and I told her my name, of course, sent pictures and all that kind of stuff. So Sarah wrote me back, and she said, Keith, finally nice to know your name. So I will tell you, the problem is that Carol did get pregnant. She did have a baby boy, but that was her freshman year in college, which was 56 and 57. The baby was born in August of 1957. Now, I was born in August of 1960, and this is definitely not me. I was born in 1960. And she did give up the baby for adoption. Okay, one thing I forgot to interject here is this adoption. This is crazy. It'll come up later. Was it illegal? Not sure. Shady? Definitely. And it's not mine. Now, something I wanted to interject here real quick is that, because this comes into play here in a little while. So she had polio in 1955, and she had a baby in 1957. In between that, she was in a serious car accident, thrown out of the car, injured severely, severe concussion, all that kind of stuff. So you couple that with polio, and then the shock of getting pregnant. This comes into play later. It was pretty devastating, obviously. So Sarah goes on to tell me that she graduated from high school in 1959. So 59 and 60, she went on to college for her freshman year. However, the summer of 1960, their father almost died. He was very, very ill. They stayed home and worked and didn't go back to college for the entire year. They took care of the family and that kind of thing. So she also, that summer, met her husband, and they got married in September of 1961. So herein lies the problem, right? Or bombshell number one. The dates don't match. So then she goes on to say that after the baby was born in September 1957, Carol went back to school at a local college and completed 2 more years. Then she went to work at a local bank where she stayed until she got married in September of 1961. So what do we got going on here? How is it possible that I have confirmed her name and signature on the original birth certificate? It's obviously a forgery, right? Well, we think. We still don't know for sure. I'll get to that. But, so she goes on to say, I will share medical history with you. So we don't have a plethora of bad things in our family history. Long-lived, not really any cancers or anything like that, which I'm a pretty healthy guy. I haven't really had anything except for, me, but that was because of car accident. So then she said, I think that may be of little value to you unless we took a DNA test. I took a DNA test. Part 5, the helicopter. Okay, so it's kind of getting interesting now, right? Well, at least I hope you think so. Okay, so we were at the DNA test. Yeah, okay, so here we go. Okay, so this is where it starts getting a little crazy, especially the next one. Okay, so part 4 took place in February of 2017. In my final email with Sarah, she said she would talk to her brother, Johnny, and see if he remembered anything. But he was 15 or 16 at that time, and he may not have been even involved with any of it at that time or remembered anything. He was just a teenage kid in the latter part of the 1950s. So, and that was it from Sarah. I didn't hear from her again, didn't expect to hear from her again. But I did find out later, and this will come into play in a little while, that she did talk to Johnny. And that kind of spins into a little bit later in bombshell number 3, which is the big one. Okay, so I left it there at that point. This was in 2017, right? I was like, okay, we're done. There's nothing more to do. So fast forward 2017 to the fall of 2020, right in the middle of all the COVID shit. We didn't pay too much attention to that around here. We wore masks for about, 2 weeks. Hey man, this is Texas. Sorry. Anyway, we were having dinner one night and my mother-in-law said that she had received as a gift from somebody an Ancestry.com DNA test. And now they know their entire family history. My mother-in-law is second generation Italian. My wife is third generation Italian. They know everything, all the way back to who made the first noodle in Rome back in the 1600s or whatever. So they know everything. So it was kind of useless to her. She knows her entire bloodline and everything. So she gave it to me. She said, why don't you do it? Because she knew about some of this stuff that was going on. And she said, why don't you do it and see what comes up? I'm like, huh. And I was kind of excited about it, but really nervous about it too. It's like, okay, it's either going to tell a lot or it ain't going to tell nothing. So, okay, what the hell? And I didn't hem and haw this time. I sent it in, I don't know, in whatever it was. I think it was November of 20. And I got it back, I think early December. And of course what I did, I logged in immediately. And wow, I immediately found several first cousins and one possible sibling. Yeah, just like that. So actually a possible brother. And the closest match was, I don't remember how many points it was, but basically it was, this could be your brother. Either a first cousin, strong first cousin, or a brother. And so his name is James, And it shows in the system when somebody was last online, and it showed him that he hadn't been online for like 6 months. So I was like, okay. And then you can email within that system. God damn it. You can email within that system. Sorry, mosquito. You can't, so you can't directly email with your name and everything. It's basically your username. So it's still kind of anonymous, right? So I sent an email to him, and then there were also two other, basically first cousins. One was a little higher than the other, and their names were Joanne and Raquel. Then there was some third cousins, and I just went on down the line there. But those three were the closest. And Raquel was a couple points higher than Joanne. So I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and email them as well and see if I get anything back. And then, okay, this part's always a little hard because I'm kind of an emotional guy. Just am. Always have been. Fucking stick a tack in your ass. On December 26, 2020, my mom passed away. She had vascular dementia, and it was extremely rapid. She was 86 when she passed away, and it was pretty sad. So I left this all aside. We had to deal with the funeral and all that. And in about mid-January, just for grins, I checked that mailbox again, the email or the mailbox that I had created for Sarah. And I hadn't heard from Sarah since 2017, right? And I thought, well, I'm just going to look and just see if there's anything in there. There was an email in there dated September 5th, 2020. This is now, I think it was January 10th, 2021. And the subject line was, "Hi, brother." And then everything really got crazy. So we'll end here. Okay, so at the end of part 5, you remember that I got an email that said "brother" in the subject line. Well, it was not James from Ancestry that I thought might be my brother. No, this was Annie, Carol's daughter. Oh, this is where it's going to get crazy. Okay, back in 2017, in my initial letter, I said that I would keep that email address open for 6 months. Well, I never closed it, obviously. I don't know if this email still works anymore because my aunt chose not in caps to tell me anything about your letter back in January of 2017. I'm quite upset by it. I'm tired of all the damn secrets. If you see this, please contact me. Maybe I'm your half-sister. And that's all it said. I was like, oh my gosh. So a little information is Carol, bio mom. Carol had got married in September 1961, where she remained married to her husband until she passed away in 2015. So Carol had two children, Annie and, I had to change the names, hold on. Annie and Mike. And if Annie does see this, she's going to get all pissed off. Annie, why didn't you just use my real name? That's what she's going to say, because she's quite a character, I'll tell you that. She's extremely smart and ferocious when it comes to information like this. So at a very early age, she knew there were secrets. She overheard conversations, she overheard arguments. In fact, one particular argument that we'll get to later, she overheard, and it mirrors what other facts that we find out here, and that'll be in the next episode. So we'll keep that in mind. So this is 6 months later, right, since she sent the letter. And so I replied back through email. She didn't put her number in there, just emailed us. And I replied back, and I got a reply back to that email in 5 minutes. And she sent me her phone number, please call me. So I did, and we talked for 3.5 hours. And, got caught up on all of her family and some of the stories and some of the crazy things that she did know. And there was stuff now that I know. She sent me pictures, and it's actually a good thing we weren't in the same part of the country, because she was California when in the 1980s, and I was here in Dallas in the 1980s, because, oh my gosh, she was hot. I totally would hit on that if I'd walked into a bar and seen her. I mean, I wasn't so bad myself. What would you do if you walked into a bar and you saw this guy in 1985? Or this guy in 1987? Yeah, and I had a Camaro with a 4-speed and T-tops too. So I was, yeah, and I could dance pretty good too. So, I had a lot of fun in the 80s, if you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, so basically, Annie's been looking for me her entire life since she was cognizant of something going on, secrets in the family. A lot of secrets, which we'll get to. Very early age, she overheard arguments, conversations with her mother, her grandmother, her sister, just things that didn't make sense to her when they were talking about the children. There was also an argument that was very poignant to later on that she overheard about her mother going someplace to meet somebody. And we'll get to that in a little while because she was spot on accurate. Unfortunately, Annie didn't have the greatest home life. They were actually well-to-do and very, in the early 1960s, you know how it was in California, you're, keeping up with the Joneses kind of stuff. Well, that was them. So her mother treated Annie pretty bad. She didn't physically abuse her, but she mentally abused her and ignored her, basically. Just didn't treat her like she was there. In fact, when she got out of high school and went to college, she never went home again. But treated her brother like, put him up on the pedestal kind of thing. Well, and then there were bouts where she would be a loving, really, a loving, nurturing person, and 5 minutes later, she's screaming at her. Because of all those injuries and all that trauma, probably today, she may have been diagnosed as bipolar. And according to Annie, that's probably toward the end. This is not YouTube.
Penis.
Okay. I'm leaving that in there. Okay, so that's a long story. I'm leaving it in there. On my YouTube channel, my sons always walk by and would say penis. And so now that they aren't here, my wife does it for them. So, okay, sorry. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Okay, so anyway, today she would probably have been, and in her later life, along with the dementia brought on by polio, probably bipolar, right? So there was just a lot of angst during that time. But all of these secrets throughout the entire family, hushed conversations and that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of an odd time for her. According to Annie, near the end of her life, she would have some cognizant. She would become cognizant and would always comment on the children, saying that they had to save the children. Where are the children? So it leads us to kind of think might have been talking about me or we'll get to that. Annie lives in Idaho now. She grew up in California, but and her parents eventually moved back to Pendleton, Oregon, and that's also where Sarah lives. So the summer of 20, Annie and her husband were visiting her dad in Pendleton, and she spoke with Sarah, and Sarah came clean on the letter that I had sent in 2017. So Annie came down on Sarah. Why all the secrets? What happened? What's going on? She also kind of pushed her dad. Her dad claimed he really didn't know anything other than Carol had been married before. Yeah, married. So between 1955 and the fall of 1957, she had polio, which was a car accident. She got pregnant and married. But she wasn't married in the fall of 1957, and we'll get to that. So you can just kind of imagine the trauma that would put somebody through. I mean, she was 1957, she was 19. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? So Annie didn't get at that time the full story or even know about the baby at that point in 1957. So as we're talking, I asked her, I said, have you ever been on Ancestry.com? She said, no, I didn't bother to do that because I know my family's not on there. Nobody's on there because of all the secrets. And she was correct. They're not on there. So I told her about it, and I told her about James and Raquel and Joanne. And I said, I think James might be the baby from 1957. And I said, but there's nothing on your side of the family because there's nobody there. So I could be the father's side of the family. So I just don't, you don't know, there's just no information there. And then the same thing with Raquel. There was a bunch of information with Joanne, but none of it related to James or Raquel. So that's one side of the family or the other. So anyway, so Annie went ahead and ordered the test, and she did a rough job on it. And as soon as she got it back, she called me and she said, "Oh my God, there's two of you. Two of you. All this time, there's two of you. It makes so much sense. The secret, the weird, it makes so much sense." And we'll leave there. Next one is this even going to get crazier? Okay, part 7, right? So there's two of us. So what the heck is going on? Now, Annie was able to squeeze some more information out of Sarah. So Carol had apparently met a serviceman, I guess in college or a bar, who knows, and got pregnant. And he was in the U.S. Army. Well, it was literally a shotgun wedding. They said, "You're going to marry her or else," kind of thing. Well, apparently, the family was trying to, I guess, really trying to protect Carol because of all the crap she'd been through. So they shipped her over to Idaho to live with her grandparents. They had a big, like a sheep farm or wheat, I don't know, some kind of farm. So the husband was deployed to South Korea. Well, in that time, they hatched a plan. And apparently, they wrote a letter to the husband, told him that the baby was stillborn, and they annulled the wedding. Now, as far as the adoption goes, we don't have all the pieces, but a little bit that we got from James a little bit later, it appears that there was a friend of the family who could not have children. So they kind of secretly went through, I guess, a local agency in Boise, and they expunged or destroyed the original birth certificate, created a new one, and James got a new home. Now, unfortunately, that was not the best upbringing either, but James and his family are just fantastic. His wife is just beautiful. She's an absolute hoot. And they have 3 kids. In fact, they've got 2 sons that look almost the same age as my sons, and even one of them is the same name as Dylan. So it's kind of fun. And same thing with Annie. Annie just has 1 son, and he is now in the U.S. Navy, and it actually might be a little bit my fault and my son's fault. I don't know, a little bit. But he did join the Navy after we all met and that kind of stuff. So they're just all really, really neat people. Oh, and James also he's a gearhead. I'm jealous. He's got a great shop. He works on Jeeps and builds old Toyota pickup trucks, and his son is into Subarus and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so obviously it runs in the family because we all have gasoline in our veins. So now as we got talking, James told us a story. James lives in Oregon also, and when he was little, and this was somewhere around maybe 1965, 66, 67, somewhere around there. We don't really know the exact dates. But his parents took him to this random hotel, and he went swimming with this woman. And this kind of coincides with roughly the same time that Annie overheard this argument with her mother, or with her grandmother, her mother, and her aunt. Again, a lot of this is kind of speculation. However, when James saw the picture of Carol during that time frame, he said, "That's the woman." So at one point, Carol visited James. So it was kind of a weird situation. That was the only time he never saw her again. So kind of weird, huh? So yeah, it's kind of strange situation there. But there's all of these secrets all throughout. I mean, the stuff came up all the time as Annie was growing up, and now when I was adopted, everything was completely sealed. My parents had no information at all on birth parents, which they never even saw the original birth certificate. In fact, here's the funny part. Okay, so the original paperwork that they were presented when they first took me home. So the paperwork they originally got, it said baby boy Jimmy. Now, one of my best friends, Brian, you know who you are, Brian, if you're watching this. He saw this paperwork because we were talking about one time. So this was years ago. He saw this and he goes, "Okay, Jimmy." So now he calls me Jimmy. Anytime, whenever he wants to rile me up, he calls me Jimmy. So it's kind of funny. Now, so all of this stuff with Annie, the email, talking to Jane, all this stuff happened in like 4 days. So while I'm talking to Annie, after she said, there's two of you, and I said, well, you're not going to believe this. Literally, that morning, I got an email in the system from James, and with his phone number, and she was, well, call him. So I called him, and we talked on the phone for like 3 hours, and then I told him all about Annie, and he was just like, oh my God, this is freaking crazy. And here's something interesting, is that James never knew until he was like 16 or 17 that he was adopted. And like I told you earlier, that my parents, from the get-go, I knew I was adopted, but they, made sure that just wasn't an issue, but they wanted me to understand that. My brother as well. James didn't have that. And they didn't tell him. I guess he accidentally found out too. It was a kind of a stressed situation. He was 16 or 17 years old. But so I told him about that. So about Annie, and he was like, oh my God. So as soon as we got off the phone, he called her, and then she called me back. And this, like I said, this all transpired maybe, I don't have the exact timeline, but like 3 or 4 days. It was just freaking crazy. I'm just like totally overwhelmed. Well, Annie kind of forgot to tell me she was in Texas. So she's retired, and her husband is semi-retired, and he's a physical therapist, and I believe what he does is semi-retired, but what he does is a couple times a year he'll take a contract, 2 or 3 months, and they'll go someplace. They'll hop in the RV and they'll go someplace and spend 2 or 3 months someplace they've never been before, and get paid for it. But I believe he specializes in military injuries, so it's pretty cool. So I was like, what? He said, yes. And our contract, so they were way down in deep South Texas, it's 10 hours from here. And I said, okay, well, when are you coming through? So again, this is late January at this point. He said, well, we're headed home back to Idaho in April. I said, wow. And so anyway, I talked to James too, and I said, well, we're coming. Annie and her husband were going to come through. They were just going to spend 3 or 4 days here. So James and his wife, they flew down, and we spent 3 days together, and it was just the amount of information and just the fun and catching up with all of our families and explaining everything. It was really amazing, and overwhelming too. In fact, quite overwhelming for me, because it took me a while to really process everything, and I'm still processing, because that wasn't my intention to find all this stuff. I just wanted a medical background, but I got a lot more, and it's really been pretty cool. Now, you might think, well, hey, that's the end. Met each other, you got together. No, not even close. So we're going to get to bombshell number 3 in the next one, which is, it's huge. I mean, it's like, holy crap. So I'll have that one posted tomorrow at 3 p.m. Texas time. And I don't know if that will be the last one. There might be one more follow-up after that, but it's like, the secrets, the lies, the deceit, all of these things that have gone on for so many years. And we'll find out, is my original birth certificate forged or not? So we'll find out tomorrow. what is it with old people anyway? Oh, me? I'm not old. I'm always thinking they have to take secrets and crap like that to the grave. It doesn't do anybody any good. And it's not like there's a statute of limitations on this shit, right? So, anyway, look forward to maybe the last one tomorrow. I don't know. It might not be. Y'all take care. Thanks for watching. Well, I've been working on the rust bucket all day, but it's time for part 8. Oh boy. So, this will probably be the last one in this story. So the first thing you probably want to know is the certified copy of my original birth certificate from the state of Washington real? No. It is a forgery. Yep. So, here we go. What happened was, so last summer, Annie gave me a call. And she said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah." So she said, "Okay, get ready." Let's see. So her father's been in declining health, and it was time to move him into assisted living. Last summer, Annie and her family went over to Oregon from Idaho to go ahead and move him into assisted living. So obviously a lot to do, right? Clean out the house, sell a bunch of stuff, get it ready for sale, all that kind of stuff. So she was cleaning out stuff. She found a box of pictures and she started looking through them. And there were pictures of her mom and her sister and some other family members she had never seen before. And she was like, just kind of looking through it. Way back in the day when you would take your film in for processing to Kodak and that kind of stuff, a lot of times they stamped it. That's even before Kodak had, film cameras that actually stamped the date. If you set the date in the camera, I mean, that was a 90s thing, I think. But so this is in the 60s, right? Late 50s, actually. Late 50s, early 60s. So she started looking at these pictures. So there's a picture of her mom standing on the trunk of a car. I think it was a 59 Ford. I unfortunately don't have the picture. I would have actually shown that picture, but when I got my new phone, a bunch of my text messages and some of the images didn't come across. Of course, freaking Apple. Anyway, but it was a picture of her and I guess her aunt washing this car. And you know how back in the day, women would wear little short shorts and take a button-down shirt, unbutton it and take it tied up like, I don't know, kind of like a halter top type thing. But that was a thing back then. And I guess it still is. But anyway, she was wearing that. The date stamp on it was May 1960. She ain't pregnant. And then there's multiple other pictures of her mom and sisters and all around this time frame. So she starts going through other pictures and they're all around that same time frame. She's like, what the frick is going on? She's not pregnant. So then she approached her dad. She said, the last time, what the hell happened? And her dad, he's not as cognizant as he used to be. He yelled at her and said, "You have the wrong Jackson. And I'm not saying anything more. I'm never talking about this again." And that was the end. Wait a minute. There's 3 Jacksons. There's Carol, who I thought was bio mom, right? It's her name and signature on the birth certificate. Then there's Sarah. And we know for sure that it couldn't have been her because she was definitely at college. That was proven. And she was like, it wasn't me. She said, if it was, I would have told you. Well, and then there's Johnny, the brother. You following me? Yeah. So she then went back to talk to Sarah what happened. And she said, I was at school. I don't know a whole lot. I know that Johnny got in trouble. In fact, he got beat up by some people and put into the hospital. Well, what we kind of thinking is it might be the brothers of the girl that he got pregnant, which was probably 14 or 15 years old, as he was like 15, about to be 16. So, yeah, that's the situation. All the secrets, all the lies on 2 different fronts of this to cover up all of this stuff. Now, we don't know exactly what happened and how all this transpired, but we kind of put a few things together. Is that Carol only had one semester of school left to get her college degree, and she quit. And part of this, the father dying, that the father nearly dying, getting real sick, that happened. But what also happened is that she quit school, and supposedly, again, this is kind of hearsay, we don't have all the details, she moved to Seattle and took a job at a bank there. And what we think is she may have been protecting this girl, or maybe the family was in on it, who knows. But apparently she had the baby in Seattle. Definitely, I was born in Seattle. And Carol was there. And, I don't think anybody ever asked for driver's license back there. You just signed your name and went, yeah, that's my name. Yeah, that's her name. The girl that delivered the child, that's her name. And so likely what Carol did is basically tell him she was the guardian of this child and just lied about the names. That's the only thing we could think of. I mean, it's just, wow. Now, what Sarah also said, do you remember anything? She said, again, she was at college when all this transpired, going back and forth. And she said that that he had a girlfriend, and this is a real name, or well, we don't know exactly, but this isn't made up, that her name may have been Betty. It may have been Betty Watson or Wilson or something like that. Now, here's a bizarre thing. So, you remember back when I was on Ancestry and I found Joanne? Well, pretty sure that Joanne is on the mother's side of the family. We originally thought that was the father's side. And you'll remember that that Annie called and talked to her. And she may have figured out what was going on and then found out it's like, oh, this is the other way around. And blocked her and blocked all that stuff. Now, she was a little bit far down. She definitely would have been a first cousin, not a sibling. But here's the weird thing. So I told you before that I lived in Spokane, Washington from age 10 to 17, age 10 to 16, almost 17. And so that's where she lives. And I did get some information out of her that she actually went to Ferris High School, which was Lewis and Clark High School, where I went to, our arch rival. So she was not only in the same town, but she was on the South Hill of Spokane, where I grew up, and like really close. So what I'm kind of thinking is that it may be either her, I would assume that's probably her aunt is probably my bio mom, and may live in Spokane. I don't know. So she probably would be around 77 at this time, because she was probably, she could have been 13, 14. We're really not sure, but definitely younger than Johnny was, and he was like 15. So anyway, so you can see why all this stuff got covered up. I mean, so that this is why Annie got so into all of this stuff over the years, because it wasn't one lie, it was two. It was on one side you had Carol with all this stuff, and then you have covering up what Johnny did because he was a kid. I mean, I don't know what he probably could have gotten probably could have gotten nailed for statutory rape, something like that. So anyway, I can see why some of this got all bound up like it did, but now so Johnny refuses to talk about it, and I don't blame him. I don't, if this is this is the way it's going to be, I won't have anything to do with it, obviously. So and then of course I'm sure that Betty, if that's if that's who she is, and if she was at that age, she probably doesn't want to remember anything about it. It was probably very traumatic for her. So I can understand that stuff, and I don't think I'm going to pursue this any further. Although Annie's really pissed off, and what she wants, she's hatched a plan, and I kind of told her, let's not do that. I'm not even going to tell you what it is unless she does it. I'll be back with this. So, but Now, as I remember, I think that Johnny only had one daughter and I kind of didn't pay attention to that until all this happened last summer. So, but I think he just had one daughter, and actually at one point she was here in Dallas, and she has like some kind of, well, I don't even want to speculate on that because it had to do with the FBI and stuff like that, and I'm not going to go there because I don't have the whole full story. But it was pretty wild and off the hook kind of stuff. So that's where it stands now. Will I ever know? Will I ever find out? I don't think so. But am I going to pursue it any further? Nah. I'm done. I found this new family, and the mystery is kind of sort of solved, and you can see just how twisted. But my biggest thing is the concern of what happened to Carol. I mean, again, can you just imagine the trauma of polio, car accident, pregnant, marriage, give up the kid, and try and move on? That had to have been devastating. I mean, it just had to. And back then they didn't get people, help from, shrinks and shit like that. You didn't do counseling. You just, threw some spearmint gum in your mouth and chewed and kept on going, or something to that effect. So yeah, pretty wild, huh? But it's still kind of, how bizarre. I mean, who freaking, I had no idea when I got that piece of paper in the mail, it's a forgery, and it was going to go down this path. So anyway, so if any new developments come back, which is a possibility, I'll come back and share that. But anyway, I just, thanks for following along and let me do this, because it was just kind of fun and cool and put it all together. And I like telling stories. They're usually car stories, but still, I do like telling stories. So anyway, appreciate it, and y'all take care. And maybe this will spur you on to do your own investigation if you were adopted, or maybe you don't. So anyway, y'all take care. Again, appreciate it. Thanks. And I'm going to get back to work on the rust bucket. So, like I said, some pretty crazy stuff. Now, am I going to pursue it any further? No. But if you know anybody that's named Betty, and not you, Betty. We have a good family friend. Her name is Betty, and she lives in Spokane, but it's not her. Hi, Betty. I know you think I'm crazy already. So anyway, if you know anybody named Betty that lives in Spokane, Washington, that might have been 14, 15, or 16, right around 1960, send her this link. All right, boys, you be safe now. Y'all take care. I'll see you on the next one. We're back to the rust bucket because it's getting close. Interior stuff next.